It's not often that I go into bat for a police officer. My relationship with the police since the COVID lockdowns has been strained, shall we say. But I cannot stay silent about the convicting of New South Wales Police Officer Sergeant Benedict Bryant, who has been found guilty of dangerous driving occasioning death because a teenager riding a stolen motorbike hit his stationary vehicle and died of the injuries that he sustained in that crash. I'm going to take you through the ABC article about this case, the crash, the arguments from both the prosecution and the defence, and the comments from Judge Jane Culver as she handed down what I consider to be an extraordinary decision that sets a terrible precedent, which will only make the current youth crime wave far worse than it already was. Because the dead teenager, Jai Kalani Wright, he was working with others as part of a team stealing multiple cars and motorbikes, and at the time of the crash he was speeding and failing to stop for police, riding a stolen motorbike. And yet somehow he's been turned into the victim here, and the police officer who had stopped his car at the time of the collision is now the criminal, according to Judge Culver. This decision declares open season for young criminals. Apparently, they're never going to be considered culpable for their own actions, no matter how criminal and no matter how reckless. And this decision handcuffs police officers who, as you'll see as we go through this article, they are now expected to be mind readers, to be able to anticipate a criminal's every move, not for the purpose of catching them. Oh, no. For the purpose of letting them go unharmed. But actually there is some truth to the idea that Jai, the dead kid, isn't actually the one fully at fault here. There is someone else who should also bear some guilt, and that is Jai's dad. The one man in that kid's life who had the primary responsibility to ensure that his son didn't become the sort of person who stole motorbikes and went on high-speed chases evading the police. But Jai's dad, Lachlan, he's playing the victim too. Apparently everyone's a victim here. The 16-year-old stealing people's motorbikes, he's a victim. The deadbeat dad who failed to raise his own son, apparently he's a victim too. And nowhere do any of them seem to give a rat's about the actual victim in all of this, which is the dude whose motorbike that got stolen by Jai, and whose car was stolen by one of Jai's mates. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If everyone is a victim, then no one is a victim. And the twisted logic of this terrible decision proves beyond doubt, as if any more proof were necessary, that our justice system turns criminals into victims and the rest of us into criminals. But before we get to the details, my name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us. I help people to cut through the crap and make sense of the nonsense. I'm 100% viewer supported. I don't have any sponsors or any advertisers. And I kind of like it that way because it allows me to say things that aren't politically correct. Things like, hey, dad of that dead kid, did you ever think that maybe this is your fault because you didn't discipline your son while you had the chance? Now, I couldn't say that if I had sponsors or advertisers because, well, they'd freak out. So I rely on you guys to keep me and the Topher Project going by buying me a coffee via my website, topherfield.com. And while you're there, do check out my books, DVDs, and merch at the shop using the shop button at the top of the homepage. Now, I have 2 best-selling books about government, power, human rights and civil disobedience. Plus, you'll find the DVD of my multi-award-winning documentary, Battleground Melbourne, and there's a brand new range of t-shirts and hoodies with lots of cool designs, not to mention caps and stickers as well, and all of that is available via the shop at topherfield.com. And everything you buy helps me to keep the Topher Project going. All right, let's dive into this article and get a picture of what happened in this particular case. 16-year-old Jai Kalani Wright died in hospital after suffering serious head injuries when the motorbike he was riding collided with an unmarked police car in Alexandria. Police said the bike was stolen along with a car, both of which had been spotted by officers nearby before the incident. The New South Wales coroner was investigating Jai's death as a death in custody because an officer was seeking to detain him at the time of the fatal crash. I'm sorry, a death in custody? No, a death because he was trying to stay out of custody. That's not the same thing, and the fact that the system tries to conflate those two things is already concerning. But let's keep reading. The Crown argued that the cause of the collision was Bryant's decision to establish a roadblock that made it impossible for Jai to manoeuvre around it. Impossible? Not if you look at the photos. This is a police helicopter photo of the crash site. You can see the red oil-absorbing kitty litter on the road, the motorcycle on its side, and Sergeant Bryant's car, still sitting where it was hit by Jai on the motorbike. Does that car look like it could have created a roadblock that was impossible to maneuver around? Or does it actually look like a dirt bike could easily be expected to maneuver around it, provided that it wasn't travelling at completely insane speeds, or perhaps had a rider with no idea what they were doing? There is acres of empty road, plus there's a footpath, and of course Jai had the option of stopping and giving himself up at any time, or even just turning around and going the other way, or any one of a bunch of options other than slamming at high speed into the front corner of a car that was, by the time of the impact, sitting still. But this is where it gets crazy. The prosecutor said, as an experienced police officer of more than 22 years, Bryant ought to have known the rider would not stop. So cops are supposed to be mind readers too, magically knowing what criminals will or won't do, and positioning themselves in advance for the maximum safety of the criminal? Should he have wrapped his car in bubble wrap and supplied a pillow on the bonnet? Maybe some milk and cookies in case Jai was hungry or hungover? The prosecution were, in my opinion, shameless in their efforts to frame Bryant as the criminal here, saying the accused, that's Officer Bryant, had relevant information that would allow him to conclude that the rider of the trail bike would go to considerable lengths to avoid capture. Now, that relevant information they speak of, that was an order that had just come through on the radio not to pursue Jai or the driver of the stolen car. Now, such a decision is usually made on the grounds of public safety, the belief of the senior police or the command that the pursuit would be a greater risk of injury to the public than not. But somehow the prosecution have argued, and the judges agreed, that because of that instruction not to pursue, that Bryant ought to have what? Made his car magically disappear and cease to exist? Break the laws of physics so that his car and Jai's face could occupy the same space at the same time? I mean, what's he supposed to do? He literally brought the car to a standstill. And also, isn't going to considerable lengths to avoid capture kind of what criminals normally do? Are we saying that the police just aren't allowed to capture or stop people who don't want to be captured? So the cops should just stay at home then? What's the point of having police if they're not working to capture people who don't want to be captured? None of this commentary, none of this prosecution, and frankly none of this decision makes any sense in any sane world. The prosecutor said, as an experienced police officer of more than 22 years, Bryant ought to have known the rider would not stop. Judge Culver told the court she agreed with the Crown's arguments, saying that all the reasons proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused was driving the motor vehicle in a manner dangerous to another person or persons. Whoa, hold up. Only dangerous to another person who was riding a stolen motorbike at high speed in a bicycle lane, refusing to stop for police. Have we forgotten all of that? That's like saying that a truck driver was driving in a manner dangerous to the suicidal person who ran out in front of his truck. At some point, you have to say that the idiot got what the idiot deserved. And sure, it's tragic when a 16-year-old idiot takes himself out of the gene pool, and I get that his family's upset. That's normal. But this is on them, far more than it is on Officer Bryant. For his part, Jai's father seems oblivious to the fact that his son is dead, at least in part, because he failed as a dad. Yes, I'm going there. I'm saying the thing you're not supposed to say. Hear it from the dad. Speaking after the verdict was handed down, Jai's father, Lachlan Wright, told reporters he knew from the day of the accident this should be the outcome. From the first day, we were told by a senior police officer that this happened, that a car pulled in front of Jai and caused the collision, he said. After that, we had to put up with police investigating police, and this not being pursued by the DPP. We had to put up with going to a coronial inquest. Mr. Wright said what occurred in the street in Alexandria almost 3 years ago shouldn't happen. You're damn right it shouldn't happen, Mr. Right. Because the first time you found out that your son was screwing around with lowlifes and common criminals, you should have put a stop to it by any means necessary. You should have been his father. Predictably, the Aboriginal Legal Service are calling this a win. In a statement, the ALS, the Aboriginal Legal Service, said Friday's verdict could be the first time a police officer had been convicted over an Indigenous death in custody in New South Wales. It is rare for police officers to face criminal charges when they are involved in the death of a community member, and even rarer for a court to return a guilty verdict, ALS Principal Legal Officer Nadine Miles said. We are not aware of a previous instance where a police officer has been held criminally responsible for the death of an Aboriginal person in custody or in a police operation in New South Wales. Again, calling this a death in custody is an abuse of language and is intended to load the dice, to manipulate public opinion, and to turn the criminal into a victim and everyone else into criminals. Do you want to know why we have such a problem with youth crime right now? This is it. The soft actions from the police command, giving the order not to pursue, to let them go rather than risk injury to the criminal or maybe to someone else. Follow that with the judge blaming the police for a death that was caused by the young criminal's own reckless actions. Then add the media, unironically amplifying the unmistakable message. The message is, you're not responsible for the consequences of your own actions. And no matter how bad you've been in life, if you die at the hands of the police, even if it's on the front bumper of a stationary police car, then you'll die a victim and a hero, because there's no difference between those two things anymore. This isn't just a legal problem, this is a cultural problem. We no longer consider it normal and acceptable for people to experience the consequences of their own actions, even if those consequences are tragic. We have this delusional belief that nothing tragic should ever happen, nothing should ever go wrong, even when someone does everything wrong. Newsflash, everybody. In the real world, actions have consequences, and you cannot break the laws of physics without experiencing a bit of physics in the face. Telling kids that you can be an idiot without consequences is setting them up for a tragic end like this one. Jai's death is the consequence of Jai being an idiot. That's not a heartless thing to say. That is the cold, hard truth. That is the truth that I will be teaching to my son and to my daughters, so that my children learn not to be idiots, so that I don't fail as a father in the way that Jai's father did. I suggest that as a culture, we need to embrace consequences. We need to use stories like Jai's as cautionary tales for the sake of the rest of our younger generation. My name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and this is what I do. I say the unsayable thing, the thing that you all know is true, but sadly most people don't have the stomach to admit out loud. I'm 100% viewer supported, so if you appreciate these no-nonsense videos, then help me to keep going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.com. And if you like my style, you'll love both of my books. They're about government, power, human rights, and civil disobedience. There's my first best-selling book, Good People Break Bad Laws, all about the role of civil disobedience in the modern age. Then there's my second, also best-selling book, Good Christians Break Bad Laws, all about the theology of civil disobedience. And there's also the DVD of my multi-award-winning documentary, Battleground Melbourne, plus my t-shirts and hoodies in a range of different designs, all available at topherfield.com. That's my old website. Head over to the shop via the tab at the top of the page. You'll find everything there, and everything you buy helps me to keep the Topher Project going, so I can keep cutting through the crap, saying the unsayable, and making sense of the nonsense that surrounds us. Thank you for watching to the end. The algorithm loves you, and so do I. Please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts on all of this. Am I being too harsh? Do you think the prosecution maybe had a point? Or do you think perhaps that this is a terrible decision that sets a terrible precedent? Let me know in the comments. Also, check out this video that YouTube thinks you will like while you're here, and as always, think free.